Good morning, members. We've formed a quorum. It is also time to start. So I call the meeting to order. Item 1. Since the last meeting, we have received 3 information papers. The details have been set out on the agenda. For Hon LEUNG Che-cheung, he has written in to urge for signboard control, and there will be a written reply. Without further ado, I would move into the second item. We have a long agenda, so I don't want to spend too much time on such matters. The second item on the agenda is as follows: proposal for setting up a joint subcommittee under the panel on development and the panel on home affairs to follow up the issues relating to the redevelopment, maintenance and management of aged buildings. Mr. Edward Lau made the proposal. I'll just check with you if you've got anything else to say. I don't think we should have a debate because even if we approve it, it will be occupying the 8th position in the list. Mr. Chairman, it's mainly about development. Though you have a joint subcommittee under the development panel and the home affairs panel. I would like to talk about the redevelopment, maintenance and management of aged buildings. When buildings are in disrepair and when buildings are undergoing redevelopment, the small landowners always suffer. We have always received cases for assistance as duty member rosters, duty roster members. Well, I think Mr. Lau has already set out the details concerning the proposed terms of reference and work plan, etc. So I'm here to consult your views. Do you agree to the proposal? That is to set up a subcommittee. Do you agree with him on the proposed work plan as well as the terms of reference? The panel on home affairs will have a discussion in the afternoon of the 17th of July. Once we've made up our mind, we'll refer our decision to the home affairs panel. As I have said, we have got a very lengthy agenda. We don't want to hold up the proceeding. So if you don't mind, I suggest we go directly to the President to ask for the approval or the Chairman. So hands up please if you agree to the setting up of the subcommittee. Yes. We don't have an opportunity to discuss the matter. So what about the proposed area of study? Would it be left to the subcommittee when it is set up? Well, even I myself have no clear ideas about the terms of reference proposed. I think if the Home Affairs panel also agrees to the setting up of the subcommittee, then we will try to have a discussion about the TOR. So you all agree? Then it is decided that we want to have such a subcommittee. Third item, propose amendments to the Buildings Ordinance for strengthening enforcement action against illegal domestic use in industrial buildings. Well, on the 26th of June at our last meeting, we started the discussion, so it is a carrying on of the discussion. So please refer to paper CB bracket 1 1165/16-17 bracket 03, the admin's paper. Another related paper is paper CB bracket 1 1165/16-17 bracket 04 from the Secretariat. And we have also got another paper from the admin, CB bracket 1 1310/16-17 bracket 01 from the administration. And then Dr. Honorable Lau Kwok-fan and Honorable Heung, etc. have written in. They have all been tabled. We have a very tight schedule today, so the public officers have already joined us. So why don't we carry on from the last meeting? Those who raised their hands and would like to ask questions are all absent. Oh, sorry, Ray Chen. I think 4 minutes. Thank you, Chair. If I may pick up the points in the follow-up paper 1310/16-17-01. That's about the measures taken by the BD in processing building plans of IBs for deterring the misuse of IBs for illegal domestic use. Last time we said that it seems that the BD encouraged the subdivision of units because on the face of it you could tell from the plans that it would very likely be a conversion for illegal domestic use. The BD mentioned, I would like to quote from subparagraph F in relation to their purchase notes. It is said that they would require justification for designs of facilities that are not commonly found in an IB or commensurate with industrial use would need to be provided. I want to know how many cases were subject to such a request. That is, it is suspected that it is not in line with the commercial or business use, and how many cases have been thrown out since the introduction of the purchase notes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we drew up the purchase notes, we already took into account many different factors. Say, for example, within an industrial building, you would not expect a clubhouse-like facility or something like a swimming pool. So we have been taking a preventive approach. That is, in the purchase notes, we try to see which factors should be given full consideration before giving approval. But he was talking about hypothetical cases, right? Does it mean that they have never received any designs of facilities that were not commonly found, and so far they haven't asked for justification, right? Well, I don't know about the position before the issuance of the purchase notes, but since the issuance of the purchase notes, when uncommon features were found, then they were supposed to alert us. According to my colleagues, they have told me that so far they haven't discovered any uncommon designs or facilities. Mr. Chairman, in other words, there is a big problem about the enforcement of the purchase notes. We have seen luxurious subdivided units in IB buildings. You need to gain access by an octopus card, and when you go upstairs, it is really nice, and it's much better than the living environment I found myself, the studios or a proper unit. So I'm not talking about the subdivided units occupied by the grassroots. So do you have information about such a scenario? And then is the department saying that they are aware of the constraints and they can't solve the problem without amending the law? The arrangement was started in October 2016. So cases preceding the purchase notes could not be sort of bound by the new arrangement. Well, yes, the purchase notes were introduced in October 2016. But what about plans that have already been submitted? Even for such plans, if they don't match the requirements under your purchase notes, you can still tell that it is a irregularity. My question is, does it mean that you can't take action against such cases? Secretary, thank you, Mr. Chen, for your question. It is exactly the crux of the matter. I think Mr. Ray Chen must have visited such units in some multi-story industrial buildings. I think they have been decorated in a very sort of luxurious manner. It is a high risk for this to be used for domestic accommodation. The problem for the BD is that we cannot gain entry. As pointed out in the paper, repeated visits still did not yield any successful entry. Well, the owners of such accommodation would not be cooperative. But then every year the BD will assess the risk, and large-scale operations have been carried out. We tried hard, and we've been able to gain entry. I'm not talking about the principles. Well, since October 2016, you've issued the purchase notes. In the past, approval had been given. We couldn't say that you were negligent in your duty, but can you not match the previously approved plans with your practice notes?
Secretary, Mr. Chen, if the plan has been approved and there is no contravention, and if we want to see whether IBs have been used for residential use, then we need better, more effective decision-making powers. And that is why we are making these proposals in our paper. Next member, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. If you're not ready, I will let another member ask question first. Mr. Ronick Chan. Thank you, Chairman. In the paper in 2B, it says any person who aids or abets owners in allowing another person to use an IB premises for illegal domestic purpose, these people will also be imposed criminal sanction. But then in para 9, you talk about innocent people, and only those who actually know that there is such a use will be sanctioned. I'd like to ask whether the renovation workers or contractors, like the people who do woodwork or who would fix the pipes, because they would know that there is going to be subdivision for the purpose of residential occupancy. Can you clarify whether these people will be included? Secretary, thank you for the question. I would be very careful in answering this question, because if it is about criminal sanction, it must be proved beyond reasonable doubt. If I give you an example, this will be the one. If you are an agent, you are a property agent, and you actually know, and you will be telling the client that it's okay to live here. Many people also live here. You don't have to worry. And if we have evidence to show that this has happened, then he will be caught under 2B. But as for renovation, there is too much speculation about the process. And we have to show and prove the state of mind and knowledge. And I must emphasize that if indeed we invoke the ordinance to prosecute people, the threshold will be high, and that is there must be beyond reasonable doubt. Mr. Chen, second question. Para 8. It is said that when the BD enforced the law, there was difficulty in collecting evidence. I'd like you to give me some figures. On the average, how many cases of refusal of entry have been encountered by the BD every year? And how many entries would the BD have to try to gain before they can get a court warrant? And also, how much time is needed for the entire process on the average? Director. Mr. Ho. Chairman, when there is a suspected case of illegal domestic use in IB, we would meet up with the following scenarios. The occupant will refuse entry there and then. Some people then, other people may say, okay, they would agree, and then they fix a time, maybe it's 2 months, 3 months later, and then they will continue to defer the process. And number 3, there would be no people when we go, or even if there are people inside, they do not answer the door. According to the law, we have to try to apply for a warrant. And the law states very clearly that we have to give a notice of intention to apply for a warrant. And only after that has been served can we apply for a court warrant. Sometimes people may appear to be cooperative, but then they would refuse later on, and that would already take us like 4 to 6 months. And then in the end, we would have to apply for this tougher measure, and that is a warrant. But today we are proposing to empower the BD so we can make better use of resources so that we can gain entry more smoothly. Next one, Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. Para 13. assistance to affected inhabitants. We all understand that using IB for domestic use, of course, is against the law, and it is also very dangerous. In the past decade or so, there was this huge housing problem, and many people were compelled to live in SDUs in IBs. Yes, the proposed legislation is reasonable and legitimate, but then what you do about the consequence of law enforcement is really the trick of the matter. Here you are talking about anyone who is affected by government's enforcement actions need to find their own accommodation. But have you done the assessment of the market? What would be the consequences and the aftermath of such enforcement action? And would there be any help going to be offered by the government? Are you standing ready to help those people who might become homeless as a result of the enforcement action? The second line says, those who are rendered homeless as a result of BD's enforcement actions and have temporary accommodation may, through referral from the BD, be accommodated in the Hong Kong Housing Authority's Po Tin Transit Center. So you are talking about the enforcement action which may be taken by government or the BD. Are they going to be taken differently? How should we interpret that? And how do BD and other enforcement agencies to help those people who have a temporary housing need? Secretary, yes, indeed. This is a quandary. There is a serious shortage of housing as we experience it in Hong Kong now. As we stated in the paper, the BD's power of entry is already very constrained. That is why we do not have a very accurate assessment as to how many people are now living in IBs. But there were individual studies showing that there might be 10,000 people. Our view is, if this legislative proposal can be realized, then some people who are living in IBs may be found to be in the following scenarios. One, they may have to live in a more far-off place, and we understand it would be difficult, and if they want to remain in the urban area, they may have to pay more expensive rent. That we know also. But then you have to balance the two. One, traveling time, and then traveling expenses. And then the other one, on the other side, we are talking about safety of life and limb. So I think we have to weigh the two carefully. And also, if the BD's enforcement actions, as you know, under the current policy, first, these people will go to the transit center, and if they are eligible. Sorry, Chairman, sorry. I think you are repeating yourself because this is already in the paper. I just want you to explain to me what is the difference between government enforcement and BD enforcement. Can I defer to the Housing Department to talk about the current arrangement first? Ms. Ho. According to our policy, rooftop structures built before the 1st of June 1982, if these are demolished, the inhabitants would be rehoused in public housing. The arrangement mentioned in the paper is about people moving out from IBs. These people may need temporary housing. With referral from BD, these inhabitants can go to Po Tin Transit Center, and they would have to go through the assessment to prove that they would be homeless for 3 months. Some people may think Po Tin is a little far away, and they may be able to find alternative accommodation elsewhere. And then they can leave Po Tin at any time. Mr. Holden Chow. Thank you, Chair. I have a few remarks and a few questions, please. Assistance to affected inhabitants. My view is, well, I think from last time to today, I think this has been covered by other members already. According to the paper, affected inhabitants may go to the transit center in Tuen Mun, and if they are eligible for public rental housing, if they can pass the asset test, etc., they will be given PRH. My question is, can you do some statistics about the transit center in Tuen Mun? How many places are there? How many people can it accommodate? Because once you have the new legislative proposal in place, there would be more people who will be immediately affected. I believe it is right for you to enforce the law because it rectifies what is wrong and because people's life and limb are at risk. The fire safety installations in IBs may not meet with the standards for residential use. We understand that because that can be risky to inhabitants. But then when you enforce the law, I want you to take hold of figures about Po Tin Transit Center in Tuen Mun. Do you already have the figures with you? I'd like to know how many people it can house. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chow. As I said, at present, it is rather difficult for us to go into IBs now to do surveys, and that is why we don't have an accurate estimate. As Mrs. Ho was saying, there are not too many enforcement actions at present, and so not many people eventually go to Po Tin. If people live in IBs in the urban area, of course they are living in illegal SDUs, and these people may still want to remain in the urban area. Therefore, in actual circumstances, some inhabitants may be able to find alternative accommodation in the urban area. So we don't have any scientific estimation. Well, I understand your difficulty, but I think you should try your best to do a survey, if at all possible, so you stand ready for the new proposal. I understand not many people want to go to Tuen Mun because some people can somehow find accommodation in the urban area. But what if they don't? You still have to provide appropriate housing for the displaced inhabitants. Later on, there will be this criminal sanction when it comes into force. Now, usually, if it is criminality, it will be effective when it commences, and there should be no retrospective effect. I like to confirm this because this is what we do with the criminal law in Hong Kong. Can I confirm that, please? Secretary, your understanding is also our present thinking, Mr. Chow. Thank you. Next one, Mr. Siu Ka-chun. Good morning, Chairman. I'd like to talk about the transit center as well. Mrs. Ho of the Housing Department just now said that these are friends who live in IBs. I like it, but I like to know the situation of these friends now. They are only housed in Po Tin for 3 months because they have to go through an assessment of a lack of housing. If they are already affected and they become homeless because of government's enforcement actions, then you know they are homeless. Why do they have to go to Po Tin in order to prove that they are homeless and they can stay there only for 3 months? I'd like to know why there is such a need for this assessment. And how do you fix the period of 3 months? Can it be shorter? Because some people live in Kwai Chung, their children go to Shek Lei for kindergarten education, but now you move them to Tuen Mun. So why do you fix the 3-month period? Can you shorten it to 1 month or even 2 weeks? And then improving the environment in the transit center. I understand that you use plastic chains to compartmentalize the accommodation, or plastic curtains. I think that is not conducive to privacy, and I'd like to know whether they can be provided with individual toilets and kitchens. And also, it is very crowded there. People can hardly take their belongings to the transit center. Can we be more human in treating these people who have to go to transit centers?
Well, I think this is not really covered by the proposed legislative amendments, but still I will give the floor to Mrs. Ho. Well, when they live in the transit center for 3 months, we'll try to assess whether they are really homeless. They may not return for the night on a day or two, but basically we have to be satisfied that they have no other accommodation and they have to reside in the transit center. We have toilets, we have cooking facilities at the TC, though they have to be shared. And then for family accommodation, where we do have partitioning, and we have also carried out some improvements. Say, for example, we have boards partitioning the bed spaces so as to enhance the degree of privacy. But then basically what we have been doing is that we set the mark at 3 months so as to give us time to ascertain the eligibility of the occupants. We have to check the records, for example. Sorry, Chair, I would like to know whether the 3-month period can be shortened, and I want to know whether they have their own toilets and facilities. Would that be possible? Mrs. Ho, we believe that we do need 3 months. It isn't really that long a period of time. Many of the friends, they're really friends, that have come to our transit center, they have not been too reluctant about the 3-month period. Have you surveyed their opinions? Did you also ask them whether they would like to have a shorter period instead? Mrs. Ho, on our part, we need 3 months because we have to go through our workflow. We have to carry out investigation. We have to carry out assessment. We need 3 months. As to the proposal to provide individual toilets and kitchens, it will be difficult. Mr. Yu. Thank you, Chair. In accordance with paragraph 2b, it says that any person who aids and abets owners, etc., in allowing another person to use an IB premises for illegal domestic purpose will be committing an offense. I understand that for a while we have some websites like Airbnb appealing to interested parties to go to such IBs under the disguise of guest house, etc. Well, for such websites, their headquarters won't be in Hong Kong, but they do advertise in Hong Kong. So I just want to check with you how you're going to enforce the law in relation to such scenarios so that people responsible for such websites will not be held liable. Mr. Wong, since we are talking about criminal offences, I think I need to be cautious. A few points here. First of all, the offence of aiding and abetting. Well, the threshold for criminal conviction will be high. We have to prove the case beyond reasonable doubt. I don't want to go to specific cases. It will involve many other issues. Just let me cite an example. Say in the case of an estate agent, he knows that it is an IB. He tells the tenant that yes, it's an IB, but it doesn't matter. Many people have gone there to live, so you can also go there to live. If the government can prove this point, that is, we can prove the state of mind of the estate agent, and we can prove what he has done, then it's very likely that he will be found guilty of aiding and abetting. Moreover, we do not target at the inhabitants. If the inhabitants merely reside there, they won't be caught for committing an offense. Now, for the websites, I think it's a matter of the degree of knowledge of the operators of the websites and what he or they have done, whether it would tantamount to aiding and abetting. Mr. Chairman, now you talked about an estate agent, but of course it will be clear about his identity and there will be a point of contact. But then for websites, a website won't give you a specific address, but then a website will give the details, which IB, what facilities will be provided, whether there is a toilet, what other service would be available. So on its own, it is a matter of aiding and abetting because they're trying to attract the visitors to go there to live. So would it be a case of aiding and abetting? If it is, then how are you going to carry out the prosecution? As I have said, in Hong Kong, when we have a physical person, you have a specific address. For a website, it doesn't. So is it a matter of creating a loophole? For long-staying tenants, it will be fine. So I think it's better for you to give the floor to the secretary. For online cases, are you able to catch them as well? Secretary, I think it is broadening the issue. If you talk about website and overseas website, you want to know whether it is possible for us to go after the operator. Well, I have to say that this goes beyond what can be done with the proposed amendments. What about publicity? If they publicize in Hong Kong, are you going to deal with it? Well, it depends on the case involved. As to whether a person is aiding and abetting another person to turn the IB premises for illegal purpose, well, I think we really have to look at the facts of the case. Well, the administration is here to talk about the proposed amendments. Later on, we need to set up a Bills committee to look at the specific proposals. I think last time we spent 45 minutes on it. Today, I have to be very strict about the time management. I cannot extend the meeting by even a single minute because there will be another meeting right after hours. And so by 9:35, I have to draw a line. I may not be able to give the floor to members for a second round. 3 other members would like to speak: Jiang Chongtai, KK Kwok, and Andrew Wen. Who else? Dr. Jiang. Thank you, Chair. Well, time is tight, so I don't expect a direct answer to my question. Well, I just want to comment on the issue itself. I understand that we're talking about proposed amendments to the Buildings Ordinance so as to tighten up the illegal use in IBs. I hope you will be more holistic in your approach. Don't just try to check the responsibility and allow individual departments to take up the work. Now, across the political spectrum, members are saying that would you do preparation in advance? Say, for example, have you assessed the number of tenants who will be affected? How many occupants who are currently residing in IBs will be affected? Now you say that you have no way to tell. Now you say that come a day you will press the button and then you will enforce the law, and then the BD would just put up a notice and then there will be enforcement, and then the occupants will have a lot of grievance. They will approach lawmakers from different political parties for help. I think recently we have got a case. It's Chi Hua building in Kwai Chung. So what is your assessment? And then Mr. Shiu has also raised a question. You talked about the transit center in Po Tien, but then it's in Tuen Mun. But then the inhabitants, many of them are new arrivals or single parents, and they have to look after young children, and they used to live in the urban area. And yet you move them to Po Tien in Tuen Mun, and do you know that in fact they have to check in and check out? They can't really live there. And then for the community care fund, there is this removal allowance. It takes a long time and you have to beg for the assistance. Owners are under pressure from you, so the owner has to evict the inhabitants, and somehow the SWD has been called in to have some coordination. So when we asked the housing department where the displaced tenants will go, were they supposed to live under the flyover? Now we were told that they have to go to Po Tin and they have to stay there for 3 months. But then the interim housing in Shek Lei is still vacant. So why can't they go to Shek Lei immediately to have the accommodation in interim housing? It shows that departments are being rigid and they're irresponsible. Now you want to tighten up the legislation. You force the inhabitants who are forced to live in subdivided units in IBs to go. Now you say that you claim that assistance is available. Why don't you tell them directly that they should go to the mainland to live? You dare not make such a statement. We have been wasting so much time. It's all because they're being so bureaucratic. You could have resolved the problem directly. Why don't you agree with the housing department? Is there a need to go to Po Tin for 3 months? Well, we are talking about the request from Chi Hua building owners. Can they be spared the need to go to Po Tin for 3 months so that they go to Shek Lei to stay in the interim housing? Director of Audit criticized you for having so many vacant places there. So can you not be more consistent? Can you not have a more comprehensive approach so that you can enforce your policy against illegal domestic use in IBs? And it all boils down to being more human. Now they are living in subdivided units, they're not living in luxurious flats. Come on. Now you are pressing the landowners. The owners will put pressure on the tenants and they will become homeless. Is it a solution? Dr. K.K. Kwok. No one wants to find themselves in such dire conditions if they can afford not to. Now, if you want to enforce the law, then I'm sure you have some figures in mind. Yes, you have said that you do it out of the need to enhance the safety of the tenants. How many tenants will be displaced? Now, Mr. Wong, you have to tell us whether you are actually trying to turn such tenants into homeless people. Now, it's not a matter that we haven't got space for them to live in. In particular, we know that we have the Shek Lei interim housing. It is there, and yet the government has no plan to use it. For those who are living in IBs, that is, those living in illegal domestic units in IBs, well, they have no choice. With reluctance, they go there to live. So can the administration promise to open the Shek Lei IH to the displaced tenants? Mr. Wong, perhaps Dr. Kwok wasn't here when I gave the reply a moment ago. Now, for the BD to enter the IBs to carry out investigation, it is difficult at the moment. So we are thinking of a solution. Currently, it is a fact that we have no idea about the number of people living in the IBs, but judging on our previous actions, you can see that for those who eventually have to go to Po Tin Transit Center, well, in fact, the number is not large. Of course, Po Tin is rather remote. As I have said, if I've chosen to live in a subdivided unit in an IB in the urban area, probably I want to stay in the urban area. But judging from previous figures, the number isn't that large. For the government, we have to strike a balance between two factors. On the one hand, we understand that inhabitants living in subdivided units, living in IBs, they do have a difficulty. If they have to stay in a proper unit, the rent is expensive, and yet on the other hand, there are safety and fire risks for them to continue to live in an IB. Dr. Kwok asked about the future arrangements at Po Tin Transit Center or the Shek Ley interim housing. I would like to defer to Mrs. Ho. Well, for the Po Tin Transit Center, the facilities are proper. Well, please answer my question directly. Shek Ley, don't talk about Po Tin. For Shek Ley interim housing, it was built in 1960s. In 2015, we carried out an investigation. If it has to be turned into interim housing, it will be expensive. The facilities are not comprehensive. The Director of Housing the Director of Audit has criticized us for keeping too many vacant units. Well, keep it simple. Yes, I know. I think I would like to sort of summarize the discussion. They won't be able to give us an answer.
Why don't you allow them to go back and think about it? Because later on there may be many displaced SDU residents from IBs. Why don't you just allow them to go back and think about how better to use the resources? Even if you press him today, they will not be able to answer you. Thank you, Chair. Let me use my time to state my position. You cannot turn a blind eye to the issue. If you already have interim housing in Shek Ley, you just have to refurbish it, and so it can allow people to live. You should let them tide over the difficulty. Well, this is not about his purview. Well, no, the housing department is also here. They are a whole team. Well, exactly. I am saying the housing department should take this back. You should not press this particular secretary. It is not within his bureau. But then they come as a team. We will state in the minutes that they should be asked to go back and think about it. This has been the view of some members. Chairman, as you said, and also because of Mr. Kwok's question, I undertake that we will have an in-depth discussion with the Secretary for Transport and Housing when we go back. Give us a written answer. Mr. Andrew Wen, Chairman, I don't agree with you. I know they have a division of labor amongst the different bureaus. We ourselves also have our own areas of concern. You don't have to refute me. Just state your position. No, Chairman, please be patient and hear me out. Just listen to me. I am talking about this issue. I'm not digressing. Now, why is a problem as to what I said? Of course, there is a problem. The Housing Department, Housing Bureau, you are creating new towns. Of course, you have to think about the housing element. Why is it that people have to live in SDUs and IBs? Chairman, I don't mean to be offensive, but your logic is not right. Listen to me. I will come to that point later. I don't want to be offensive. Let us not delve in controversies. Let me come to the point. I think this is a matter for the Bureau. Many members ask the same question. As many members from different political affiliations have said, this is a housing issue. We understand that this is in IBs, so it is for this secretary. But then the administration always tends to segregate policies to say, look, if there is a fire hazard, so I have to drive them out, and there will be no people who will be hurt. But then they do not have to deal with the residents because it's not within that bureau. Now, I don't want to argue about that because people understand what I'm talking about. So, first of all, I object to this hasty move. Even if you have this proposal, of course we want to enhance safety, but then you're not doing a good job. As you said, you were right in this. They have not been able to answer questions. It's very simple. Why is it that this kind of interdepartmental, inter-bureau policy has not been discussed amongst the bureaus before they come to us? Now you propose the criminal offenses, and yet they cannot tell us how many people will be displaced. So first of all, I ask for a snapshot. I understand it's difficult. I don't think you are telling a lie, but there must be a way to do it. You can even make a projection. You said you carried out 100-odd or hundreds of actions. I understand there are 5,000 IBs in Hong Kong. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you can multiply it with a percentage, so you will know how many people may have to be rehoused. You need to have a baseline before you can map out any public policy, right? We should not be here to teach you how to do your job. Secondly, Shackley and Po-Tin, they are not the way out. There are not many people living there because you prevent people from going in. You know, it is only on the day of demolition when people's belongings are thrown into the streets, and it is only on the very last day when they become homeless before they can go to Po-Tin, and then they have to remain there for 3 months before they go to interim housing. Okay, even if they don't mind the difficult situation in interim housing, maybe there are 700 units and then there are 4 blocks, so at most 3,000 to 4,000 units or places. Do you think it can take care of the demand from displaced inhabitants from IBs? Mr. Chairman, you are in business, you are clever, you can do your sums. So there is this big problem standing in front of you. So first of all, this should be shelved for the moment. There must be comprehensive planning across the departments. And 2, you must do a projection based on previous actions taken and multiply with a percentage. I think what I'm saying is so reasonable. Secretary. There are over 1,800 IBs in Hong Kong, and I think following Mr. Wen's proposal, I'm afraid there might be an underestimation, because if we look at previous BD actions, they would identify one illegally occupied unit, and then some people might just move out while the BD is doing its investigation. So, given the present statutory powers for the BD, it's very difficult for us to come up with an accurate figure. What we have is a figure from NGOs, and they are saying there might be 10,000 people living in IBs, but that is at best an estimate. And I'm really honest in giving Mr. Wen this answer. So do you accept this figure? Even if so, there is insufficient supply. Well, that is only a reference figure. As I said, if we look at BD's actual enforcement action, the experience is that because of such actions and people are going to interim housing, and yet there are not too many people because these people may think it is too far away, and sometimes they have to seek alternative accommodation, so they live in smaller accommodation with more expensive rent. Members mentioned Shackley, and as the chairman said, we would go back and take this up with the TH Bureau, and then we'll come back with a written reply to members. Mr. Jeremy Tam, you raised your hand last time. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you so much. Can I please wait until another member has spoken? No, there will be no other member because we actually have to end the item now. Okay, so thank you, Chairman. I have been listening to the discussion this morning. Members are saying that if there is no specific figure, you will not be able to ascertain how many people will be affected by your future enforcement action. Now, you do not have the power of inspection, so you don't have a figure. And later on, why are you confident you will be able to do inspection? Because you still have to make your round to the IBs. Is it that other people will be doing it instead of the Development Bureau? So, don't you have to come clean on that? Secretary, well, thank you. I think you have made a valid point, Mr. Tam. The present proposal for the administration is that there are 2 parts. 1, those people who operate illegal SDUs will be taken to responsibility, and we target the owners. But then we also say the BD should be given appropriate powers so that the BD will be able to know the situation in different IBs, and so they will be able to enforce the law. We have heard members today, and we understand that we might not need a broad brush approach. That may not be the most ideal way to do it. We'll go back and think about whether there is latitude for taking up the 2 proposals one after another, and that is first to empower BDs to get to know the actual situation within BDs before we get on to the second step. Now, this is actually for mooting the proposal with members. When we come to the drafting stage, we will consider these points. Thank you. I know time is limited. Thank you. In para 8, you say that the BD does have the power now. It can actually apply for a warrant from a magistrate to go into or break into the premises in certain situations. Now, if your purpose is to allow the BD to have bigger powers of entry, then just revise that part instead of coming up with this proposal. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Tam. As I was saying, there are two parts to this proposal. Mr. Tam, you have covered the major part. Mr. Tam, you came in late because under the present law, it is very inefficient. The BD doesn't have enough powers. It may have to pay 4 or 5 visits to a unit, and usually the owner or occupiers will not cooperate, and then both parties have to be present when a warrant has to be applied for, and if the unit owner knows that he is targeted, he will just convert the unit back to its legal use. Therefore, we are saying we need more effective powers for the BD to gain entry. Exactly. I am saying you can amend this part first. And the criminality of domestic use, I think you should empower the BD first so they can get hold of the size of the problem first. Do you agree? Chairman, Mr. Tam, I was saying we will go back and consider this point after listening to members. And also, new IBs sometimes advertise in a covered manner that people can actually live there. Now, this is illegal, of course, but then there are more and more such buildings. They provide studio flats with individual toilets and a small space for cooking utensils. And these IBs are actually now sold every day. Secretary, I'll answer briefly because we discussed that already. Since 2016, the BD has got new practice notes. If there are new IBs and there are facilities provided that are not in line with industrial uses, say it has a very high headroom, there is a swimming pool, and also if there is a toilet but there are no windows, now they would have to justify why there should be such a design, or else they would not be approved. How many such buildings have been approved? You now know there is a problem, so you will not approve more buildings. Sorry, I cannot allow you to follow up. Can I have a written reply, please? Because time is up. Mr. Chiu Kao-chun, can I ask for a written reply? He has heard you. Well, the secretary has to actually say yes. Okay, secretary, you give a written reply. Mr. Chiu Kao-chun has submitted a motion without notice. I have now given it for photocopying. I have read it. I don't think it is directly related to the agenda item, and I have decided there will not be any voting on this motion. Well, this is to respond to your reminder. You said that he would not be able to answer you today. Let them go back and think about it. No, you only heard half of what I said. I was saying the question you asked just now had nothing to do with this agenda item, and then you carried on to ask questions. I understand what you have in mind, but this is a legislative proposal. The administration is asking to amend the law, but your motion can be submitted again when there is a Bills Committee on this proposal. This is not the right time for it, and in fact, it is not about timing. We still have 3 more items on the agenda. Well, Chairman, I have heard your reminder. That is why I'm moving it. No, I understand you have heard me, but then my ruling is that this is not directly related to the agenda item. I don't think you should read it out. I will leave it on the screen. You can read it slowly, but then this item is concluded. Thank you, Secretary. Next item. Cost management for capital works projects. LC paper CB1 1284-04 administration's paper, and LC paper CB1 1284-05 the Legislative Council Secretariat background brief. Can we now invite the administration team to come in? We will welcome the Permanent Secretary for Development Works, Mr. Hon Che-cheung, Mr. John Kwong Ka-sing, Head of Project Cost Management Office Development Bureau, and Mr. Joseph LAU Kwok-fan, CAS Works Development Bureau. CAS, are you going to introduce the paper to us? Well, actually, PS, we have come back because, can you speak into the microphone? We are here today because on the 29th of June last year, the Project Cost Management Office was set up, and now we are here to report progress to you and also the latest situation.
I have, in fact, prepared a PowerPoint presentation, but you have only until 10. I would rather dispense with that. If need be, I will refer back to the slides. Could I like to ask questions? KK Kwok, Chen Ying, Fernando Zhang, Jeremy Tam, Holden Chow. Who else would like to ask questions? Now, I have to be very strict about the time management. 6 members, 3 minutes each, including your question and the answer. Permanent Secretary, please give us a written reply if you can't answer all the questions. Dr. KK Kwok. Thank you, Chair. Well, we have witnessed many cases of budget overrun in many projects, so we want to take up this matter. In particular, there are many white elephant projects. That's the first point. Second point is that the system allows the contractor to get payment for the overrun afterwards. It is unreasonable. The contractor puts in a tender price, and yet he can go back on his words and he can get payment for the outstanding sums. So my question is, what measures have you got to prevent the taxpayers' money going down the drain? For the unnecessary white elephants, I think you need to reprioritize the projects. Reprioritize the projects and give priority to livelihood issues like projects like hospitals, etc., which the new government favors. And then for the tender prices, currently the tender prices are meaningless because you can always try to increase the sum needed. And then for the South Island line of the MTR and then the Sha Tin Central line earlier on, what has happened is that the MTR can come back to you and say that they have made mistakes about the calculations and they have got the wrong information from the site investigation. Are you going to impose disciplinary action on persons involved, like demotion, etc.? Otherwise, it seems that the government doesn't have to be responsible for such matters. Mr. Hon. First of all, we don't quite agree that there are white elephant projects. What about Hong Kong-Zhuhai Macau Bridge? What about the express rail or the slow rail? If they're not white elephant projects, what are they? Chair, I won't say that they are white elephant projects. It is important for the connectivity of Hong Kong with our neighbors. We have a lot of public works projects, and they have been scrutinized carefully. They're important for our livelihood. They're important for keeping our competitiveness. Now, for individual projects, Dr. KK Kwok may have his views concerning the budget overrun. He has also mentioned that would it be the case that many contractors will try to claim reimbursement afterwards. We have mentioned this point in our paper. The new contract forms are better. So we have the procurement options in the NEC. In this way, we can reduce the amount of money claimed afterwards. Now, Dr. KK Kwok has also said that maybe officials are to be blamed for the budget overruns. I cannot agree with him. Your time is up. I have already said that I would draw a line when the 3-minute limit comes up. Chen Chen-ying. Well, for the tender prices, they fluctuate, and it will be affected by the volume of construction activities. When there are more projects, then the prices will come down and vice versa. The administration talked a lot about the micro factors. Now, what is the government's observation? I think even in the construction sector, it has been said that perhaps the government should even out the projects over a number of years. And then you also talk about the new contract or the new engineering contract approach. But it has got nothing to do with the MTR projects or rail projects. Why don't you apply the NEC to the rail projects, Secretary? Evening out the tendering of contracts. Well, in fact, the government has been doing this. We have some mega projects, and there are also other smaller scale projects at the district level, more related to the livelihood. The split between these two types of projects are sort of 50-50. And therefore, in closer to the paper, we have got the NEC form contracts. It appears that we haven't got any rail projects. I just want to say that NEC is a new approach for the rail projects. They have been launched much earlier. So currently, unless there's special circumstances, the NEC will be the norm. So in the future, when we have got other new rail projects, and in the case of new mega projects, we'll be invoking the NEC. For enclosure 2, or rather in Annex 2 to the paper, please take a look of the public sector construction projects and the index numbers of cost of materials. It appears the sand stands out a lot. Can you consider a replacement material? Mr. Hon. Yes, this is also a point of concern to us, in particular natural sand. We are in fact studying the possibility of replacement materials. Say, for example, is it possible to use crushed fine? We want to know whether it is possible in terms of plastering work. Well, we have already improved the material, we have improved the quality, and the crushed fine can be used for plastering, and the job is a good one. Mr. Lau, well, for the PCMO, are you going to introduce an underwriting mechanism so that you cap the budget cost, so that there won't be overrunning and you don't have to come back to the LegCo to ask for supplementary provision? I think this is quite common, and so would you consider having an underwriting mechanism? And currently, the construction cost in Hong Kong is expensive. I think we are ranking the first or the second around the world when it comes to construction and demolition. Probably we can blame it on overlapping. It has been said that there are more regulatory staff than construction staff members. Are you going to examine legislation like the building ordinance so that you can deregulate in a way we can lower the construction costs? Secretary. Well, as to the review of our contractual conditions and terms, it is an ongoing job. We'll continue with that. As to the idea of capping the budget costs, well, there may be a problem. If we are to cap the costs, irrespective of what happens, then we have to consider whether contractors can afford it. Even if there are, the number will be few and far, and then the premium will be much enhanced when it comes to bidding for the project. We need to be very cautious, but I'm sure you can study the matter. Well, the contractor will say that the consultant is to be blamed, But then when a consultant makes a mistake, it appears that the administration has never gone after the consultants to claim damages. Well, it's difficult to comment on individual cases. There may be such cases. We can also go after those who need to be responsible at the designing stage. Now, we know that the construction cost is high, and that's why we have the PCMO. Now, you talked about the need to deregulate. Well, perhaps there are areas amenable to deregulation, and that's why we've set up the office. In Enclosure 3, we have also referred to the fine-tuning. We have looked at 8 areas of our policies out of 20. So the office will continue to examine the policies requiring fine-tuning. Can you elaborate on them? Yes, you can provide supplementary paper. Fernando Zhang. Well, overrunning happens all the time. Some to the tune of billions of dollars or tens of billions of dollars. And then for the South Island Line East, it is beyond imagination. And the cost overrun is to the tune of 30%. When they include the construction of pedestrian footbridges. You have said that you won't underwrite. You won't have an underwriting mechanism in answer to Mr. Lau's question. But then are you asking the contractor, the tenderer, to bear the risk? Otherwise, every time they will come back and ask you to fill up the gap. So are you going to have an underwriting mechanism? Mr. Hon, as I have said, if we are to introduce an underwriting mechanism, we need to be cautious. For contractors who have the ability to bear such a risk, the number won't be large. And then, yes, for the SIL, I recall that there were problems with underground facilities. But then the contractor, at the time of bidding for the contract, might not know everything at the time of tendering. If you say that, well, we will ignore that and you have to bear all the extra costs, whatever comes up, will anybody be able to bear such a risk? And then for the question of cost overrun, we want to improve the situation. We hope that with the new engineering contract, we can seek improvements, and we hope that there will be the partnering approach during the contractual period. And what's the advantage? The merit is that we hope that for any disputes arising in the construction period will be minimized in terms of number. Now, if we have a target cost option, it means that there is an incentive for everybody to suppress their cost, because by suppressing the cost, the gain will be shared between the project proponent as well as the contractor. And then equally, we will be sharing the pain if there is an overrun. So there's an incentive for us to drive down the overrun. So I hope that by introducing the NEC approach, it will improve the problem. And we are also enhancing the skills of project management on the part of our staff members. So the third part of our three-pronged approach is also important. Is we want to enhance their ability to manage projects. Please give a written paper on the so-called partnering. Jeremy Tam. Probably you need to provide a written paper for my question, so please listen carefully. Now, I'm more interested in Annex 2 to the paper. That is the CNSD index numbers of cost of materials, as well as the wages trend. Over 2 to 3 years' time, I want to know about the percentage taken up by such workers. Now you talk about marine sand, and then the index is highest, but it doesn't mean that the price is highest. So please tell us about the proportion taken up by that particular material in the overall cost. Otherwise, we know that we don't just look at the fluctuation in the price levels. We are interested in the proportion of the material. And then the same is true for the wages. Now for the bar, bender, and fixer, it might have doubled. For others, the increase may be 40% or 50%, say for example the wage trend for an asphalter. But then you only need to have a small number of bar, bender, and fixer, so the total cost may not be great vis-a-vis other types of workers. We have compiled the information.
A very rough figure is such that if we're talking about construction of a building, materials will take up 50% of the cost, and labor cost will be about 30 to 40%, but it is only a ballpark figure. It may not apply to every case, and it comes to civil engineering, then plant and machinery may take up a higher proportion. If you go to para 8 of the paper, it says that we have done a study, and then from Q1 2010 to Q1 2013, the construction costs have risen from 40% to 60%. Exactly. I have seen this. This is in para 8, but then this is only very rough. You only talk about the various types of construction works, but I'm asking you to give me some breakdown. In Annex 2 to Enclosure 4, it talks about the number of costs of materials and also the wages trend. I let you to let us know the percentage of each kind of material or each kind of worker taken up in each construction project. I don't think I can answer in this short while. I can give a written reply. Next one, Mr. Holden Chow. Thank you, Chairman. 2 questions. Number 1, the paper says that for construction materials, they take up a high proportion. It says 50% here in the paper. I am a layman about this, but about raw materials and construction materials, is there any offsetting mechanism? In other words, if you can foresee the quantity required, then the contractor or the builder should order for such materials in good time. I don't know whether there is such a mechanism because I'm not in the field. Chairman, we don't require contractors or developers to do any offsetting. They should know what materials should be needed and they would make their own commercial decisions. Well, can you not strengthen your communication with them in this regard to have a kind of offsetting mechanism? If it is done well, they can manage the rise in cost of materials. Secondly, if I remember correctly, I'm talking about SILE. I agree with you, PS, that sometimes ground conditions cannot be foreseen. But however, you can always do a review. The SILE is such that departments were giving incorrect or incomplete information about public utilities underground, and so they were uncharted. We are asking for a system for coordinating the information about underground utilities. So each department should not be left to give its own information which may be incorrect or incomplete. P.S. I have heard this view. Secondly, about the offsetting mechanism, I think we should take a look, but we don't know about its effectiveness. And then about cost overrun for SILE, we will certainly do a review afterwards. If I remember, this has to do with underground public utilities. Basically, this is the responsibility for the Highways Department. Is there any room for optimization? Yes, we can take another look. so we can take care of the present rather confusing situation. No more supplement. Mr. Ben Chan. Thank you, Chair. Construction costs have been rising and it is a big concern. Sometimes there are external factors, sometimes they are economic in nature, like the fluctuation in the renminbi exchange rate. And we understand there need to be adjustments. However, in recent years, we believe there is a more serious situation about construction cost rises, and the rise is higher and faster than the change in exchange rates. And you have told us what you believe the cost overrun factors are. However, you must remember there is a multi-layer contracting in our construction field in Hong Kong. When a capital works project is proposed, those who are in a position to bid are not that many because the project is huge in size. And then after winning the bid, the developer will, or main contractor, will further contract out the project, and then therefore there is a kind of monopoly shared by just the big few in the market. And to be rather blunt, this may amount to bid rigging. I'd like to know whether you have a way to prevent this kind of suspected bid rigging. And secondly, we know that with regard to building refurbishment, the price can be different by 100% when there is bid rigging. Do you have a consultant estimating for you the overall cost of projects within government? And can you take new measures so you have a private reference price? Everybody in the market knows how much money you need to seek from the finance committee, but internally you should have a kind of private reference and before you assess the bids. Do you think you can do that? And also with regard to contractors who always have cost overruns, will there be a demerit point system to record such? And then will there be a mechanism to prevent cost overrun by certain contractors, especially right at the beginning of projects? Do you keep a record of these people and what they have done? Well, I think you should give a written reply. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. Number 1, Para 4. You emphasize that the amount of public works is more or less the same as the average for the last 30 years. But have you considered manpower resources? For example, our construction workers are much older now, and that goes to show that they may not be able to work as much, and this may affect productivity. Have you included these factors for consideration? What kind of construction load can be supported by the Hong Kong society? Therefore, do you know our construction capacity, or else you are not getting to the core of the issue? Secondly, when you talk about introducing new technology, I'd like to know whether there are relevant measures to assist this. We, of course, have a very short supply of land, and there is a high density of people. And at the same time, when our construction workers are aging, so affecting productivity, What are you doing about this? P.S. Let me show you this slide. Why do we say it is more or less the same as the 35-year long-term average? The blue line is the GDP growth, and the lower line is what we have put into construction. So the CapEx is still on the low side. And you have made a very valid point. How can we raise productivity? And the number of construction workers has grown from over 300,000 to over 400,000 in the last 2 years. But if we talk about skilled workers, they are mostly over 50 years old. This is our main concern. We want to introduce more technology into the construction sector in order to reduce our reliance on workers and also to raise productivity. Now, what can we do in Hong Kong? Our project office and all the works departments are working on it. At the CIC, we have set up the Technology Center, which is the Innovation and Technology Application Center. When will you have some progress? We can report back next time. Okay, please give a written reply because time is up. All members who want to ask questions have asked their questions. Thank you very much, PS and your team. Next item, interim public consultation on the detailed feasibility study for environmentally friendly linkage system for Kowloon East and progress report on Kai-Tak development. Papers CB1 1165/05 and -06, one from the administration, the other one from the secretariat. And then we also have CB1 1165/07 and other background brief on Kai-Tak development. The officials are coming in. There is a big team. I will not read out their names. I don't have time. I'd like to just remind members that Mr. Victor Chan, PAS, from the Development Bureau, and also Mr. Tim Fong, Assistant Secretary from the Development Bureau, and also we have Mr. Frank Wong, Deputy Head of Energizing Kowloon East Office, Development Bureau as well. We have a tight timetable. We are late by 10 minutes already. You have the PowerPoint. Do you want to go through that? Well, it's up to you. If you use more time on the PowerPoint, it will be more difficult for the conclusion of this item on time. Chairman. Please speak into the microphone. Please do not look at members. We are to report to you the findings of the stage 1 of the detailed feasibility study. And we are proposing that we should go for the elevated option, and that would form the direction of our future study. We have also included the latest progress of the Kai-Tak development. Now I'd like to ask the Development Bureau official to introduce the PowerPoint. Thank you, Chairman. Because of time constraint, I think I will do away with the background part of the proposal, and let us go right to the conclusion part. In conclusion, we have looked at and evaluated different transport options, and we believe the elevated system is the most suitable for Kowloon East, including capacity, sustainability, reliability, etc. And then next stage, since we have decided that the elevated system would be best suited for the transport backbone of Kowloon East, we will look at other issues relating to it, the alignment, procurement approach, the locations and layout of depot, and also the operation plan as well as management as well. I will stop there. No other officials would like to say anything, right? I have, including myself, 8 members who have raised their hands to ask questions. But by 11:15, we must return the room. This should take us to 10:25. But since there are so many members, I can't just assign half a minute to each. Therefore, I think the next one next item on lifts and escalators ordinance. I think we have to roll it over to the next meeting. The clerk can tell the officials for that item to that they can leave, so they have more time to do their own work, because we have to finish by 11:15. I will read out the names of the members: Wu Chi-white, Jeremy Tam, KK Kwok, Jonathan Ho, Wilson Orr, and one more member and myself. I don't like to draw a line at all. I very often think there is no reason to draw a line, but this time around, since we have to wrap up by 11:15, if other members are going to walk in, I will not be able to give them any floor to speak, because I will have to state the views of the LP. 3 minutes for each member.
Mr. Wu Chi-white, I have a brief point, Mr. Chairman. Well, for the linkage system, I think it's a matter of the concept. Would you like to ease the congestion along the Kwun Tong line instead of starting point, rather than trying to have a tourism-led project? Well, we have to sort out the objective. Otherwise, the whole thing will be weird, and then the cost will be expensive. So, for the EKO, I think you need to change your objective. You need to change the objective of the project. I think it should aim at easing the pressure along the Kwun Tong line. Otherwise, it won't be cost effective. Are you going to consider a hybrid model? Against the background of what I've said, you may want to connect with the cruise terminal. Perhaps you can have a road connection so that you send the citizens to the interchange. You would like to consider an elevated mode, and then between Kai Tak Station and Yau Tong Station, we need to link up the southern part of Kwun Tong. You should aim at easing the pressure along the Kwun Tong line. At Yau Tong Station, there's the place where people interchange between the Island Line and the Chang Kwan O Line. And then for Kai Tak Station is where people interchange for starting Central Line and also the East Rail. So please incorporate what I've advocated, Mr. Chen. For this environmentally friendly linkage system, we would like to tie in with the development of Kowloon East. Mr. Wu wondered whether we could adopt a mixed mode. I would like to defer to my colleague. Thank you, Chair. I think the member asked about the connectivity. This is more than a tourism project. We'd like to link up the different transportation nodes. We have a hospital, we have the sports park. So this is also our objective. As to the future extension design, currently we are looking at Kowloon East. We have already distributed our leaflets. In fact, in the second stage, we will consider having an extension. So other than covering Kowloon East, we wondered if we can have it extended. Please give us a written reply. Jeremy Tam, he's not here. Sorry, you're here. I think you have a motion. Sorry, I missed you. I'll give you the time to read out your motion. Otherwise, we won't have time to process your motion. I think you better follow the rules as to whether you have time to deal with my motion. I will use my time to look at the elevated mode. Earlier on, Dr. Edward Yu has already said that the elevated mode would be the only possible mode to be considered. Why don't you also look at the 8th grade option? And then for the Hong Kong Logistics Institute, there is a submission. I've also read the submission. It is said that there is a limit For the elevated mode, it means that it is a rail system. For an elevated system, you can use a bus or you can rely on the modern tram. It is still a way of elevated system. It appears that you haven't really considered carefully the suggestion from the Hong Kong Logistics Institute. So first of all, Dr. Edward Yiu has earlier on talked to me, and he wondered whether you could, at your second stage, consider both the upgrade as well as the elevated options, so that you study both and then you come to your conclusion. And what about the submission and the proposal from that submission? Mr. Chen, I will defer to the CDD. Ms. Pang, thank you, member, for your question. Let me talk about the idea of a mixed mode. Even at stage 1, we don't think that it is quite right for the EFLS for Kowloon East. For Kowloon Bay and Kwun Tong, currently the congestion is serious in terms of the TNT. If we have an upgrade system, if we expect it not to impact upon the current transport, it will be quite difficult. Other than serving Kowloon Bay and Kwun Tong, if we want to serve Kai Tak, it means that we have to cross the Kowloon bypass as well as this future central Kowloon route. Therefore, we need to have an elevated mode around Kai Tak Sports Park. And then for the former runway park, we have already got 330 hectares of land. You are just repeating what you have got in the paper. There are only 30 seconds left in my time slot, and the chair will be very strict about the time limit. Well, judging from the site constraints and the current traffic congestion, an elevated system will be preferable. But then you are going to make up your mind based on what you have got. I'm saying that you can continue with the study and you don't stop right here, because you've only got scanty information and you try to base your decision on the scanty information you have got. Mr. Jonathan Ho, sorry. 2 other members have joined. They have raised their hand, but prior to your arrival, I've already said that we didn't have time to process with further members' questions. At that time, I didn't know that Jeremy Tam would be moving a motion. By 10:45, I have to hand over the venue. Other than KK Kwok, there are also 5 other members who have already raised their hands. So I can only give you a minute each. I don't need to use up all my 3 minutes. Mr. Jonathan Ho. For Kwun Tong and Kowloon Bay, traffic congestion is indeed very serious. Now, as to why we have got traffic congestion along Kwun Tong Road, it is simply because of the high volume of traffic, and then it takes you more than an hour before you can go to the roundabout at Hoi Yuen Road. So if we are to opt for an upgrade system for the EFLS, it is impossible. Wong Tai Sin Kwun Tong can no longer cope with a further upgrade system taking up the road space. I have 2 questions. First of all, for this EFLS, I want to know whether you can link up with the existing older urban areas. Now, for Wong Tai Sin, we are separated into the northern portion and the southern portion by major thoroughfare. Now, if you don't link up with the older urban areas, it's impossible for you to bring people to the new development areas. So can you take people to the older areas as well as the MTR stations? If you have to carry out any work in the waters, you will be bound by the Protection of Harbour Ordinance. It will be best if you can link up with Yau Tong. If you can't, then it means that the EFLS will not be maximizing the benefits. Chair, I think we are mainly talking about the future CBD, and at the second stage, We'll try to use the EFLS as the backbone, and then we'll try to see if we can enhance the connectivity and accessibility of other existing areas. As to the case of the protection of harbour ordinance, well, in fact, we are also covering the Victoria Harbour, so we are bound by the PHO. Well, if you only serve the new development areas, then during the weekends, you can't have sufficient people flow. So perhaps you need to try to bring the people from the older areas in Wong Tai Sin, etc., to the new development area, and then you can balance out both. At the second stage, when we look at the future extension design, we will consider this matter. Next, Mr. Wilson Orr. Thank you, Chair. Well, the EFLS for Kowloon East has been on the drawing board for a long period of time, starting from the previous CE as well as the previous term of the legislature. I think we need to implement the EFLS as soon as possible. I'm against an at-grade system. Kowloon City, Wong Tai Sin, and Kwun Tong district councils have agreed that an at-grade system would only aggravate the traffic congestion. The rail system is congested, the road network is also congested. I would like to see the second stage of the public engagement exercise being started as soon as possible. I want to comment on the congestion along the Kwun Tong line. If you have the elevated system, you still have to go past the railway systems in Kowloon Bay and Kwun Tong. There are a lot of people even within the non-peak hours, so please consider this matter. And then for the EFLS, currently for Heung Road, it is seriously congested. I don't know when the EFLS will be implemented. I think you need some short-term measures so as to ease the traffic congestion in Kowloon Bay and Kwun Tong. So please tell us what you have planned. Mr. Chen. Thank you, Member, for your comments. Well, at the second stage, of course, we'll consider the EFLS as well as its connectivity with the existing rail system. Well, maybe the CDD can also comment on the expansion of the road network. Thank you, Member, for your concern. At the second stage, we'll give it serious consideration. We have got TD staff members who are looking at the short-term, medium-term measures, and then for our office, would like to improve the walkability in Kowloon East. In the long term, we have the Sha Tin Central Line, and we have also planned for the Route 6. I'm sure they will ease the pressure in Kowloon East. For the EFLS, what we want to do is to enhance the connectivity within the district. We hope that there will be a reliable service, say, when the weather is bad. We hope that we can ease the traffic congestion within the district. Next, Mr. Edward Lau. Thank you, Chair. As Wilson Orr has said, for the EFLS for KE, it has been on a drawing board for a long time. Now, this is sort of an interim review. For the EFLS, I understand that we have got a preliminary alignment. Now, I want to know whether you're going to have another study about the alignment as well as the location of the stations. And when are you going to start construction? I think that's the most important point. And do you have a timetable? If the EFLS cannot be implemented, do you know about the impact on the transport of the district, in particular the negative impacts? Now for Kowloon East, we have got a lot more industrial uses and commercial uses, and then we are having more and more bus routes entering Kowloon East. In the absence of the EFLS, what is the likely negative impact? I'd like to defer to the CDD. Ms. Pang. Thank you, member, for your question. Now, for this system, what we want to achieve is as follows. For the alignment, we are going to re-examine the alignment so that the alignment itself, as well as the location of the stations in the light of the district consultation, will be improved. As to the timetable, we'll look at the procurement approach. We need to have the alignment study before we can determine on the program. If the second stage is smooth, then we can implement the project as soon as possible.
As for intra-district transportation, we of course have a lot of concern for Kowloon East. District councils have held in-depth discussions, hoping that in the short and medium term we can have measures to relieve the situation in districts. I'd like to ask about the second stage. In the first stage, you are rather passive in collecting views. You mounted exhibitions, but you did not do anything active to hold residents' meetings. I'd like to know whether you can be more active or proactive in the second stage to listen to members of the public. Yes, we will. Next, Mr. Junius Ho. Chairman, I'd like to ask, apart from the elevated option, have you considered using a travelator like what we have in Tsim Sha Tsui East? It is not costly. It is also very efficient. In the Central and Western District, we also have the hillside escalator. That's an excellent system. It is easy to manage and maintain. I'd like to ask you about the cost comparison for using a travelator and the elevated system. You haven't really made up your mind as to whether you should go for a monorail or a kind of transit, rapid transit. I'd like to have a rough cost comparison between travelator and the elevated option. Mr. Chen, in the first stage feasibility study, we have considered many different options, including a travelator. And our consideration was that we should have efficiency, capacity, reliability, and sustainability for such an EFLS. As to the other part of the information, may I defer to Ms. Pang of CEDD. Thank you, Chairman. Indeed, we looked at the option of a travelator. It is not a matter of cost, but it is because it can only be a supplementary short-distance passageway for pedestrians, making the passage more comfortable. Usually, travelators can only travel at 2.5 to 3 km an hour. The fastest, according to the consultant, is the one at the Toronto airport, and it can only reach 8 kilometers an hour. So it cannot achieve the speed we need to take care of the needs of the pedestrians in this area. Mr. Ho, 8 kilometers is quite good if you can already see that in Toronto. The monorail is only to be about 9 kilometers in length, and I think if the hourly speed is 8 kilometers, I think that should be quite good. Can you give us more information for reference after the meeting? Certainly. Dr. K.K. Kwok, 3 minutes. I have never seen such an outraging consultation paper. You did not put your finger on any dollar amount. Talking about the monorail, you mentioned a figure of $20 billion before, but now you include no dollar figures. You are cheating Hong Kong people, and in fact the monorail has been found to be a failure all over the world, not to mention the one in Sydney. You can have environmentally friendly buses, pavements, etc. In Kowloon East, it is most suited for such passageways. It is a small community, and if you can have an environment bus, you can't have them on Nathan Road, and now the distance is only 8 kilometers and there will be enough time for them to be recharged. What about environmentally friendly public light buses? Well, of course, it's easy to say a monorail is good. The stations would not be even 1 kilometer apart. And you also have to build the stations. The turnstiles, the ticket selling machines will also take up space. I don't want officials to be playing such tricks all the time. Let us know how much money has to be spent on the monorail. Mr. Chen. The costing of the AFLS depends very much on the option chosen and the alignment, etc. Give me a range. You talked about $20 billion in the past. Has it jumped to 30 billion now? In 2010, well, given the 2010 prices, the estimate was $12 billion. This time around, we have investigated into the different options, and we believe the elevated system should be proposed. And when we have confirmed that we would go for the elevated system, we would consider alignment and then the operating mode, etc. And then at the next step, we will be able to have a costing. Please, this is outrageous. Last time 12 billion, and now what is the dollar figure like? I like to get all the data of the consultancy report, including how costing was done. Otherwise, you are misleading us. When can you give the consultancy report to the panel? Can I ask the CEDD to supplement? Thank you for the question. We have done the study on the EFLS. There are 2 reports. One, the use of at-grade railway in other parts of the world. You only have a few seconds. Yes or no? The 2 reports are available online. We can print out a version for the member for reference. I don't have enough time. Can we have more time? No, I cannot give you more time. This is only consultation. The Liberal Party would like to say this about the proposed introduction for an EFLS for Kowloon East in order to tackle possible rise in traffic volume and also to optimizing accessibility in Kowloon East. The LP will not object to it. However, with regard to the elevated system, after screening out other options and considering the financial feasibility, its sustainability and matters of maintenance and repair in the future, the LP has reservation about such a proposed option. And also you need to build a bridge in Kwun Tong in order to link up Kai Tak and Kwun Tong. So 100 vessels with masts at 40 to 50 meters high will not be able to enter Kwun Tong typhoon shelter during typhoons, and the marine workers will be affected, and if they cannot go into the typhoon shelter, their life and limb would be at risk during a typhoon. Can you take away the option for the Kwun Tong Bridge and therefore realign the proposed EFLS, or else how can you tackle the risks posed on marine workers during a typhoon because of the building of the typhoon bridge, the Kwun Tong Bridge? You should give me a written answer, and now I only have 2 minutes for Fernando Cheung and Paul Jie to ask their questions. They will not give you replies. Fernando Cheung. Thank you, Chair. The Labour Party has reservations about the so-called EFLS. Talking about people flow, people would be traveling between commercial and residential areas and the MTR system. There is limited people flow within the commercial area. If you have to do works at grade so as to build this EFLS in an elevated manner, you will not improve at grade traffic. You will just be reducing space for pedestrians. you will not be able to widen the road space at all. Overall speaking, you are just gilding the lily. For Kai Tak and the industrial and commercial area, you may enhance their value, but it's not very helpful. Next one, Paul Chair. If you really understand Kowloon East, you will not say what has been said. This is not gilding the lily. It is a very urgently needed facility. In 2011, 2012, this is already said in the policy address that it should be done, but now we have made no decision after so much discussion, even after 10 years. I think this is unacceptable. As one member from Kowloon East, I think you should make a final decision as soon as possible, and the only option is between elevated or at grade. So I would not agree with Mr. Jeremy Tam that there should be further delays. You don't know, you did not know what we discussed in the last term. Why has it been delayed as it has been now? It is because in the last term we talked about using a tram. I myself proposed that, and studies have been done. If you have other proposals, please. Mr. Jeremy Tam, the Civic Party, aren't you civilized? You should allow other members to speak. Sorry. This is my 1 minute, but then Mr. Jeremy Tam of the Civic Party is barging in all the time. Sorry, my train of thought has been disrupted and my time is up. Mr. Jeremy Tam, I hope you will respect other members. No one barged in when you spoke, and you do not have to necessarily agree with other members. Even if they say something wrong, it's not your matter. You can use your time, and I'm here to chair the meeting. You should not be here to teach me how to chair a meeting. You can use your time to state your views. Please do not interrupt when other people speak. I am the chairman. In the panel that I chair, I hope you will respect the chairman. I will have to deal with the motion by Mr. Jeremy Tam. We have 13 members here. Let me count. We lack one. Let me read out the motion. Ring the bell. If the other member doesn't come back within 5 minutes, we cannot take a vote. In accordance with House Rule 22P, Mr. Jeremy Tam wrote, according to the submission from the Hong Kong Institute of Transportation and Logistics Management, there is a wrong estimate or assumption in the EFLS consultancy that only the elevated option is possible, but then it has not considered the flexibility, connectivity and sustainability of the modern tramway. Therefore, this panel will not support the elevated system, especially the monorail or any rapid transit. The administration should consider the bus rapid transit, modern tramway or other possible modes and include it in the next step of study, and to provide more data about different modes of transport, to include but not limited to the indicators of the construction cost, so that we can continue to assess the sustainability of different modes of transport. Do we have a quorum? I will try to wait for the quorum to be formed. We are already sounding the bell for members to come back to vote. What is it? Since we are waiting, can I be given some time to explain my motion? Because other members may misunderstand me. I have to say that I need to extend the meeting by 3-4 minutes until we have taken a vote. After the vote, we will conclude the item. And there is something under AOB. Oh, there shouldn't be anything under AOB. Mr. Tam, you can now make use of the time. Sorry, Mr. Paul Chair, sorry. Mr. Paul Chair, what is it? Since this is a motion to be moved without notice, we did not even have our 3 minutes. Mr. Jeremy Tam has already used his 3 minutes. He doesn't need to explain his motion. I only had 1 minute. Just now, Mr. Paul Chair obviously misunderstood my motion, and I asked the chairman, and the chairman allowed me to speak. I will allow you to speak 1 minute. In fact, just now when you were given the floor, we already said you should try to use the time to explain your motion. But thank you, Chair. This motion is not about definitely having to study and at grade option. Please read it carefully. We are talking about an elevated system as well, but it should not just be restricted to the monorail or a rapid transit. According to the Hong Kong Institute of Transportation and Logistics Management, it says that even if it is elevated, you can still include a bus or modern tram option. And the Hong Kong Institute of Transportation and Logistics Management, half of the officials here are members of this professional institute. So let us get that clear. Some establishment members, even one of them, is actually a member of this institute.
So I'm trying to clarify the position of the Institute of Transportation and Logistics Management. So it isn't just my personal view, but also I'm relaying the view of the Hong Kong Institute of Transportation and Logistics Management. We have got a minute or so left. I've already put up the motion from Jeremy Tam on the screen. Please take a look and try to see if you agree or not. When the bell stops, please vote. As you are not in your original seat, I will ask the clerk to count the votes. All right, we have got a minute. We have got a quorum, and just now Edward Lau has asked us to consider the proposal, that is to have a joint subcommittee covering 2 panels, so as to look at the question of redevelopment, maintenance and management of old buildings. Please take a look of his proposal, like the terms of reference, as well as what else? As well as the work plan. See if you agree. If you agree, I don't know if you have got the paper with you. If you have, then I don't think we need to have another round of discussion about the DOR as well as the work plan. So you all agree, I suppose? I think just now a member asked me whether we could deal with the TOR, etc. If we want to have it discussed later, it means we have to call a meeting for that purpose. If you don't object, then we will tell the Home Affairs panel that we would like to adopt the proposed TOR as well as the work area or the work plan. Well, in this way we can save some paper. Let's put the matter to the vote. For those who are in favor of Jeremy Tam's motion, hands up please. Please hold up your hand. 10. Those who are in objection, hands up please. 12. Any abstention? I don't think there is any, right? One abstention. Those who are against. Mr. Holden Chow, are you against? So 10 in favor, 12 against. So the motion has not been carried. I've got nothing under LB. Meeting adjourned.